I know it's going to be a great writer's workshop too. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The talk title this morning is The State of the Union. Which if it were in a negative ad, it would say, The State of the Union. And I chose the talk title for two reasons this morning. The first is a selfish one. Today's my birthday. And 100% honestly, know where I would rather be. That's a great personal thing to wake up and say, it's my birthday and I get to go to work today. This is awesome. I'm very grateful. And I think ministers, whether or not we admit it, around your birthday, you can't help but kind of give a State of the U address. And you can't help but slip that in there. And so I'm honestly sharing with you that I want to share with you a couple things that I have kind of learned or am learning better in this last trip around the sun that I've made. The other reason I come up with the topic today is probably pretty obvious, in that we have a big election coming up on Tuesday. And you're all clearly very peaceful and calm and at ease about things. But I wanted to address a little bit of the spiritual principles that could be behind not only our beautiful country, but politics a little bit as well. I usually don't like to address these things too much because for some of you, especially ones who are political junkies, this is like your only break from that stuff. But in honor of patriotism and election day and doing our duty as citizens, I wanted to talk a little bit about politics and bringing a spiritual point of view to it. So I'm going to mix these things together, and hopefully it's at least entertaining to you, okay? So I'll begin by saying that I am a firm believer in that separation between church and state. I think it's incredibly important. And for all of the hell we give the IRS sometimes, I love the rule that's in there for religious organizations. And the rule is, as a church, you can't, one, endorse a candidate, or two, endorse a legislation. Now, some people do it anyways. But it doesn't mean you can't talk about issues that are important or even talk about whatever it is that you want to, but those two things you don't do. And that's always inspired me as a minister. I love that rule because it helps me, I believe, be a better minister, because it reminds me that my job as a minister isn't to tell people what to believe or what to think or what to do. My job as a minister is to do the best job I can to help folks be more clear about what it is that they believe, to be more in touch with their conscience so that they can follow it with greater clarity. And the greatest thing that I ever get to do is to create, hopefully, a safe place for dialogue about important issues and questions so that everyone can leave, hopefully, a little bit more enlightened from what they've learned to one another. So I love that rule. And I love that James Madison, who was mostly the architect of that First Amendment of the Constitution, talked not only about freedom of speech, but that the idea that government itself should never meddle too much with religion. I think James Madison was someone who saw that government and religion weren't bad things, but they were incredibly important things. And if done the wrong way, they could be very dangerous things. And so in helping to form our new country, I think he understood that if a religion ran a government, we'd be in trouble. And in the other way, Madison was also the person that wrote that there should never be a religious test for someone running for office. I know we don't always follow that well, but that to me tells me that he also believed that a government shouldn't be running a religion, and a religion shouldn't be running a government. What should be running them? Free people. Free people. People with critical thinking, people who believe in themselves, people who have a shared vision. And to me, that's a very powerful thing. I believe it not only for our government, but I love it in our teaching too, that we're not so much about a doctrine telling you have to believe this or follow this. We're saying the principles say, think for yourself, think with clarity, and practice good in your life, knowing it can be true for you and all others around you as well. One of the things I think I've really learned this year better, I think I knew before, but I know it even better now, it's this idea that the great ideals that we have in life are better understood not as nouns but as verbs. And for me, I take something like love. I've learned to see love less as a noun in my life that the world's just supposed to provide me, and more of a verb, something that I'm supposed to cultivate with action. I think I understand that better with this concept of freedom too. It's not a given, it's not a noun, it's not something that someone gives me, it's a verb that I have to practice and share with other people. The same with happiness. It's not something the world's just going to provide me, it's a verb that I have to practice and bring to life. I love how Stephen Covey puts it in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about having a conversation with someone who says, "My wife and I just don't have the same feelings for each other we used to have. I guess I just don't love her anymore and she doesn't love me. What can I do?" "The feeling isn't there anymore?" I asked. "That's right," he reaffirmed. "And we have 3 children we're really concerned about. What do you suggest?" "Love her," I replied. "I told you the feeling just isn't there anymore." "Love her." "You don't understand. The feeling of love just isn't there." "Then love her. If the feeling isn't there, that's a good reason to love her." "But how do you love when you don't love?" "My friend, love is a verb. Love, the feeling, is a fruit of love, the verb. So love her, serve her, sacrifice, listen to her, empathize, appreciate, affirm her. Are you willing to do that?" I kind of feel the same way with freedom in our country. You know, for me, it's upsetting when I hear freedom just used as a slogan or as a symbol, when really it's something that is a verb that we have to practice. For me, the moment our country is no longer able to defend its freedom is the moment that we've lost what the meaning of freedom is in the first place. And freedom isn't up to anybody else to provide for us, but it's up to us to talk about, to understand, to evolve in, to continue to practice and make known in the rest of our lives. But as so many of you here know, especially our veterans, great freedom takes that great responsibility. As Viktor Frankl put it after surviving the Holocaust, he said, "For the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast of America, we should have a statue of responsibility on the West Coast." It's a reminder that freedom isn't just doing whatever the hell you want, spare the consequences. Freedom is about the responsibility of caring for yourself and for a cause greater than yourself as well. And that, to me, is the great ideal that our country and our spirituality offer us, the ability to live for people and causes that are greater than just our sense of self. That, to me, is the heart of what freedom is. Now, I kind of laugh and I kind of get a little angry, too, when I hear pundits, especially in this election, say things like, "Our country has never been more divided." You know, this might be the most bizarre election that we ever had, but that statement about division just isn't true. You know, we did have a thing called the Civil War, right? And as much as it's declared that both of the candidates, the main ones running for president, are despised, no president was ever more despised in his day and his time than Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. He was despised by almost everyone in the South, right? And by a large amount of people in the North. And yet, today, if you read statistics or surveys on who was the greatest president of all time, Abraham Lincoln. Same for Democrats and Republicans. They almost always cherish the most. And why is that? Well, I think one of the main reasons is that Abraham Lincoln held a greater vision for our country, that he was willing to do the harder thing in opposition to the expediency of the partisan politics at the time. You know, I am a big believer in politics that I think Margaret Thatcher was right. Those who stand in the middle of the road get run over, you know. So I do think there's a natural inclination, and it's a healthy thing for some of us to want to veer more on the conservative side of things, and for other of us to want to verge on the more progressive side of things. But what can happen is you can move so far either way that you just fall off the world altogether and miss where we're trying to head and drive to. And for me, that was something that was great about Lincoln, is he understood a greater vision for our country, that doing the easiest thing in the moment wasn't as important about doing the right thing for all time. The other thing about Lincoln, as many of you know, is he liked to surround himself with rivals and people that disagreed with him. And Lincoln had a quality, this is my own interpretation of him, is that he was cool. Abraham Lincoln was a cool guy in that he loved to tell jokes. He loved to tell stories that would hit upon the universal nature of humanity. And I brought one to share with you today that he told at the height of the Civil War, and I can share with you today about the height of tensions around where our country is today. This is the story he shared with people who disagreed with him. He said, "When I was a young man in Illinois, I boarded for a time with a deacon of the Presbyterian Church. One night I was roused from my sleep by a rap at the door, and I heard the deacon's voice exclaiming, 'Arise, Abraham! The day of judgment has come.' I sprang from my bed and rushed to the window and saw the stars falling in great showers. But looking back of them in the heavens, I saw the grand old constellations, with which I was so well acquainted, fixed and true in their places. Gentlemen, the world did not come to an end then, nor will the union now." These are good words for those of us who especially have a bit of tension around the upcoming election. The union did not end then, and it will not end now. In your personal life right now, there may seem like there are lots of stars and explosions going on in the skies. But can we look beyond them to remember the constellations that are always there? The highest truths that bind us and inspire us when we can get past sometimes the messiness. And are we defined by the messes that sometimes explode in our lives or seem to be going on out there? Or by those deeper and grander truths that we don't always understand, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention to them and allow them to inspire and uplift us in our lives. If there's a word that to me is kind of lacking this election year, and sometimes perhaps even lacking in my personal life too, it's the word shared. You know, personally, I'm learning this year, I'm getting married and I have a family. Shared is a much more important word to me than it used to be. So it used to be, well, what do I want? What sounds good for dinner? What do I want to do for my life? All that kind of stuff. Well, I don't get to do that as much anymore, to the degree that I have to realize that I'm more than just who I think I am. I have to live for something greater. And I think this is something that's applicable to our country as well, this word shared. And I mean shared in the sense of shared vision. I think we're missing a lot of shared vision, this understanding that we all should want to get to the same place, peace and prosperity and freedom for all, and can disagree on how to get there. Shared in the sense of shared leadership, that the job of our elected officials should not be to have a bloodbath with each other and fight with each other, but to find as much common ground as possible in relationship to their own conscience. And lastly, shared responsibility. To me, the key to good citizenship was to recognize that anything that goes on in our country isn't just a reflection on the politician who does it, it's a reflection on us, on who we are. And thus it's so important to embrace that responsibility of being a good citizen in our lives. One of the things that we've seen to really lose the most, I think, in some areas of our country is good conversation, good dialogue, good listening to each other. There was a great op-ed by the conservative thinker Peter Werner last weekend that I thought hit the nail on the head. He said, "Politics is less than perfect because we are less than perfect. We therefore need to approach it with some modesty. Politics is not like mathematics where clear premises and deductive reasoning can lead us to exact answers. We would all do better if we took to heart the words of the political scientist Harry Clore, author of On Moderation, who said, 'There are truths to be discovered, but they are complex and many-sided. The best way to get to them is by engaging contrary ideas in a manner approximating dialogue. In the throes of partisan disagreements, it can be tempting to think of American politics as a Manichaean struggle of good versus evil. As someone who has been involved in his share of intense political debates and has been a senior White House aide, I'm keenly aware of how easy it is to adopt this parochial mindset, to feel that one is a part of a tribal community. Instead, we need the self-confidence to admit that at best we possess only a partial understanding of the truth, which can be enlarged by refining our views in light of new arguments, new circumstances, and new insights. But this requires us to listen to others, to weigh their arguments with care, and maybe even to learn from them. He goes on to talk about the kind of tribalism that we can get into. He shares a different article where a woman shares that she used to, around the dinner table, never bring out politics or religion because someone might disagree with her. But now she doesn't bring it up because she thinks everyone around the table probably agrees with her anyways. So there's not that recognition. And what happens is by so polarizing the other side, we wind up dehumanizing the other side. We wind up attacking them. We wind up calling them the other side when they're saying as who we are. And so I think there's something about this shared dialogue and listening and understanding and not being such know-it-alls that can really help us as we continue to seek to be good citizens in our country. I love something Thomas Jefferson said. He said, "I never considered a difference of opinion in politics, in religion, in philosophy as a cause for withdrawing from a friend." See that, Facebook folks? I think that the first great citizen in this country was also our first great president, and that's George Washington. And this is my personal interpretation of him as the first great citizen. And the reason why is that he was a general in the Revolutionary War, which he helped us win. But during that time, the Congress was a mess, and they gave him all the power. So he had all the power, and many of his military advisors said, "Why don't you just become king? Why don't you just take this thing over? These folks don't know what they're doing anyways. Let's take it from them." But he refused that, and he did a very powerful thing. King George VI was asked, "Do you think that Washington will give up power in America?" And George VI, he said, "No, I do not. But if he did, he would be the greatest man I've ever known." But Washington did. He let that go. Later on, he would become president of the United States. He knew that they would, that the Congress was getting together, and what are we going to call the president? They proposed that we call the president His High Mightiness, the president of the United States. Maybe the Her High Mightiness later. We'll see. We don't know. But Washington and others, they realized that was too much. Let's just call it the president. And for me, the greatest act that George Washington did in that first presidency, all the accomplishments aside, is he let go of power. He did something that folks don't normally do. He let go of power. For me, some people argue that by doing so, George Washington was this incredibly humble man. But what I think he really understood is what it really and truly means to be a great citizen in this country. As much as we want to cherish and honor the title of president, senator, or congressperson, they still don't compare to the word citizen. To be able to give that up, to step into a greater way of being. It's a reminder that even if you don't like who gets elected, even better reason to be an even better, more informed and active citizen. If you don't trust the person being elected, even better reason to pay more attention, educate yourself, and get involved in a greater way. We all have that calling, hopefully in a time like this where divisions seem clear, to hold on again to that deeper constellation, which is remembering our role in this beautiful, blessed country that we're in, that certainly screws up in so many different ways, but that's how the creative process works. We want to hold that vision in our hearts, live with it in our lives, and seek to express in greater way that unity that we're looking for. I usually don't share things that I'm learning or figuring out as I go, because as a minister you wind up just processing a bunch of crap in front of people, so I usually try to wait. But in honor of the birthday, one of those things I'm really working on right now, and it's something I've always worked on, but it's that idea, is life about making it what you want it to be, or is it about stepping into what life calls you to become? What do they have in common, and where are they unique? And I would say in my life, I've always done a really good job of being committed to truth and committed to growth. But I can also see that I haven't always been committed to that commitment. That sometimes I'm very comfortable in my way of seeing and knowing the world. Sometimes I'm very comfortable in my everyday way of life. Sometimes I'm very comfortable in my way of working and being. And you know what? Sometimes life, however, isn't always about comfort. It's about being committed to that commitment, to truth, to growth, to deepening. I can see this as true not only for myself, but for our country as well, and for us as citizens. Are we committed to freedom? Are we committed to truth? Well, sometimes, even though it's uncomfortable, we have to recognize that even in the chaotic forces, even in the stars falling from the skies, that we have to reach and deepen and found ourselves more rooted than ever in those great constellations and be a presence for those qualities and principles and ideals that we want to see expressed in our world. To close from these great words of Lincoln that I've shared in different ways with you the last couple of months, that he said to close his first inauguration address just before the heights of the Civil War and the greatest separation that we ever did have in our country. He said, "I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union. When again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." Keep your angels close by this week. Thank you very much for your time.